A lot of people talk about leadership, but people rarely talk about the journey that shapes a leader. For Ben Riley, that journey started on the graveyard shift in the warehouse, putting himself through college, step by step, climbing to the top seat.
What would you say to new people, young people in their 20s? They want to go build a life, build a career, build a reputation, build a network. What are 2 or 3 things that you would call essential?
Bloom where you're planted. Number 2, I'd say proactively solicit and find mentors to help you on your journey. And then I think the third thing I would say is just, it's amazing how much in life is just showing up. You never know when things are going to break your way or against you.
Ben Riley's leadership skills and position weren't inherited. They were built through late nights, overseas moves, learning new languages, leading teams across cultures. From managing sales on the ground to leading global strategy, with every move forward, the weight of leadership grew.
How do you manage the drama, the stress, the crises? How do you personally manage it? Like, what do you do to stay grounded, positive, optimistic? Do you have some routine?
Physical exercise, super important. I'm an avid reader. And so reading and kind of decompressing that way at night, I intentionally do that. Time with family and a lot of mindfulness.
In this episode, we explore the moments that forged a leader, the lessons learned, a perspective that only experience can teach.
Richard Bliss Brooke here. We are live.
We sit here today with none other than
Mark Victor Hansen,
Bob Proctor.
This is Kendra Hall,
Tanya Stringer,
Jeff Canfield, DeWitt Jones,
James Clear,
Les Brown.
Hey everybody, meet Ben Riley. Ben, thank you for your time today.
My pleasure, Richard. It's an honor for me. I've been a fan for a long time, so having a chance to have this conversation is, it's a real honor for me.
Well, I thank you because I have interviewed a lot of really fascinating people, authors, athletes, business people, and as you know, we know each other, and I am constantly in awe of the responsibilities that you have running a global company. And I have always compared that to like companies that I've run, and I don't even know how you do it. It's just mind-boggling. And so that's my first question for you. What is it like running a global company? I mean, I know this company, you've shipped products to 200 countries, probably got 100 different cultures, 200 time zones, millions of customers, 30 years of, legacy, which could be good and bad. In a few words, how do you sit with that?
Well, a few words, that's tough. It's uneasy at times, I'll be honest. I don't know if other people are like this. I suspect they are, but in my quiet moments, it feels overwhelming, honestly, because it is a large organization, impacts millions of people. And so that pressure of that can feel heavy. At the same time, the way I sleep at night is I look around and I see a lot of really good people. We have a really good team. I can rely on them and I can trust them, especially in times when I'm feeling a little bit inadequate or overwhelmed. I know I've got a really strong group of people who are passionately committed to what we're doing. So that's, I think, what helps me, honestly. And it can be heavy.
Yeah, because, just travel, right? So where have you been in the last month or two?
Well, I know we talk a lot about this, about how to run the business and have the travel. Fortunately, I've only been to Asia this last month. I've been to Bali and Jakarta, where we have business, of course. We had a global incentive event. And I'm in Sri Lanka later next week. So those are busy. But fortunately, the early half of this year is a little bit less so, which it helps a lot. It's hard to be traveling on the road and maintaining work. But again, people, if I've got good people that know their work, it's a lot easier to stay on top of versus feeling like I've got to be looking over everyone's shoulder to make sure that they're doing what needs to be done.
Yeah. So I'm curious, and I'm sure the audience is too, that the responsibility, the stress, the way you tend to land whenever I see you is everything's cool, everything's calm, and yet I know it isn't always. How do you manage the drama, the stress, the crises? How do you personally manage it? Like, what do you do to stay grounded, positive, optimistic? Do you have some routine?
Yeah, physical exercise, super important. And at my age and the time that I have available, I'm not intense about it, but I get in 30 minutes of something active every day at least. I feel like that really, really helps get my mind right. I also I'm an avid reader. And so reading and kind of decompressing that way at night, I intentionally do that. Time with family, I think for a lot of people, that's my recharge. And so those things really help. I think just that side of it, the self-care side of things, and a lot of mindfulness. So I try to be really mindful. For people, it's prayer or meditation, but some way where you're able to reflect on and step outside of the whirlwind that you live in to be able to get a degree of perspective. I learned from one of my mentors that when things are tough, you kind of have to start by centering yourself. Take a deep breath, elevate yourself above the emotion. Because when you act in the emotion, you're inevitably going to be rash and probably do things that you regret. So I think it's a matter of being able to elevate yourself above that emotion and then think a little bit more just rationally, logically about the best path forward. Like, what's the first step I can take to defraying a crisis or a challenge? I feel like that's been really good advice for me. Just try to work really hard to not act out of emotion. Elevate yourself, center yourself, however you do that. Breathing, giving yourself just a minute to go walk it off or whatever, but don't act rashly out of emotion. And I don't always take my own advice, but I find I'm happier when I do.
Don't always send that text message right away.
Yes, exactly. Sit on the text message, the email, give it some time. Abraham Lincoln did this famously. Of course, back in his day, he didn't do email, but he would write a letter and then put it in his credenza and let it sit. And when he passed away, there were hundreds of letters that he'd written that he never sent. I think it was sometimes cathartic to write it out. And then you would see a revised draft and see that he'd refine the rough edges a day later. So I think there's a lot of wisdom in giving it a bit of space.
Yeah. There is a 2-minute delay now on Outlook for emails, but I don't have one on text messages, which I think I probably need.
And you're like, recall.
Please. I've reached out to my network administrator. Can you get that back? He said, sorry about that. Maybe next time, take a pause. Yeah. So speaking of Lincoln, what do you read? What do you listen to? What are your resources for education, for sharpening the axe?
Internally, I talk a lot about this, but I set a goal every year to read 100 books,
Wow.
which I've done for 4 years. And I read a little bit of everything, a lot of business, a lot of, self-help, personal development work. I find those most meaningful because I'm constantly trying to figure out how to be better, just better in my role, better in my responsibilities in my life. But, that includes parenting. So I read a lot of parenting books, but I also read fun. I'll read, I like science fiction or fantasy from time to time. I love history, a lot of biographies. I'm reading a book right now by Edith Enger called The Choice. She's a Holocaust survivor and then turned into a therapist. Really interesting book that I'm learning both from her journey, but also kind of what she learned about the human experience and how I can learn from that. So I always am looking for things that can help uplift me, but sometimes decompress too. Like, I think you have to read for enjoyment. It can't be a slog. And so I'm pretty varied in what I read. But I do try to do it very actively. I do listening for usually chores. Like, I don't like doing dishes. I like it more when I'm listening to a good book or laundry or all the other things that I have to do around my house. The yard work, that kind of stuff. I'm always listening to a book. And then I do a lot of eyeball reading at night. I feel like it's a good way for me to kind of settle down, decompress a little bit. It's a good wind down of the day for me.
Do you have any like all-time classics, like bedrock books, or maybe people?
Yeah, books for sure. And I guess people that wrote the books too. The ones that have been seminal for me, and they're the ones that I read early. But 7 Habits of Highly Effective People was, I read it when I was 12 years old, and I started carrying around my my Franklin daytimer, like I took it that seriously. But it was really meaningful for me to start to think about how to be personally effective at that age, because it helped me then set goals and achieve goals, which was invaluable in my development personally. How to win friends and influence people. It's a little like, I mean, it's classic and it's a little corny in places. It's so great about helping you think about connecting with people. How do you connect with other human beings? And I've learned in my life that influence and connection is so vitally important to life, happiness, and being productive, in my work. So that's a seminal work. I love Les Miserables because of the humanity in it. It's one of the most beautiful books I've ever read. And I talk about stories and things that I love and learn from that book. I think because Victor Hugo, who wrote the book, saw the best and worst and really portrayed it in that book. And it helps me aspire to the best, the way he describes some of the heroes and the characters in the book. So that's a really seminal work for me. More recently, I think Atomic Habits is just vital. It's so it's one that you could read every year and I think pull something from it every year. I really like Carol Dweck's work. She does a lot. I think what she especially has inspired me is a belief that you can learn and grow even as you get older and get more rigid, which changing is hard. Real change is hard. And I think both Atomic Habits give you a real roadmap to do that. And Carol Dweck talks a lot about the psychology of it, how you actually do it. Things like The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, I think, is also really good on that front. And he also did Super Communicators, which is an interesting kind of along that vein. I love Malcolm Gladwell's stuff just because I think it's interesting. It makes you think. I don't think it's always completely accurate, but it really is fun to kind of study and learn and think and expand your perspective on things. But then I've also read books like The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. That's a phenomenal book. It's not really personal development, but it's really an incredible story. And one of those, you read it and it just gives you appreciation for science, humanity. Yeah. Anyway, I could go on and on. I love books, but I think honestly, I view it more as, I think physical exercise is important. I think mental exercise is important. Reading is my mental exercise. Mm-hmm. Running, physical activity, lifting, those are my physical. This is the way I exercise my body, but reading is how I exercise my mind.
So what do you think about business today and moving forward at the speed of AI and geopolitics and the environment and, trillion-dollar brands we're competing with? How do you sort of sort through, okay, how are you going to guide your company through all that? Those are ominous powers that are impacting business. How do you sort through that? What do you see for the future?
Look, that's a great question. And I think the business environment and the economy is more dynamic than it's ever been in our lifetimes. And so that is a little bit intimidating, just the rate of change. But that also means a lot of rapidly emerging opportunity. And so I think for me, my strategy is involving, like, getting every brain in the game on our side, make sure you got the right people. That's the first thing always. And really engaging those people so that they're helping you tackle the unique challenges of your business. I think most businesses have a place. I work for a 30-year-old company. It's added value for 30 years. So there's certainly good here. At the same time, the future of the business is not where the last 30 years have been. There are breadcrumbs that we can follow, but we also have to take, where we are today and then grow into that future. So I think it's a combination of identifying the core value you add to the market. Like, what are you good at? Why do people come to you, and what is it that you can be better at than anybody else? And then just really focus on magnifying that specifically. For us, we know what we're really good at. What we have to figure out is how do we present it to the next generation of consumers so that they can see it the way we see it, and adapt our message so that it appeals to them better than it does today. I think there's a lot of work that we can do using tools, technology, but also delivery, the products, how we present it, branding is part of that. So being able to move ourselves into a future where someone who's 20 or 30, who's our future, lifelong consumer. They can see what we do and love it and then say, I want to be a part of it.
So you mentioned having the right people. One of the most impactful books I read was, I think it was The GE Way, Jack Welch. And I only got one thing out of it, which was C players cost you money. B players actually cost you money. A players give you a return on investment. But most people never choose to hire the A players because they cost too much. So how do you navigate the right people? That has to be an exacerbating challenge. Turnover, you don't really know until they're in a role. Human resources. How do you do that? Like, do you have any tips? Do you have any challenges there? Any heartaches there?
Yeah. One of the hardest things in my career, honestly, if I look back to the mistakes I've made, it's generally having the wrong person in the wrong seat for too long. Or maybe the right person in the wrong seat for too long. It's really hard to do well. I likewise learned this from Jack Welch in Winning. He talks about it, about how you, and it's uncomfortable for people, I think, sometimes, but I believe in stack ranking my team, basically to say, who's my top performer on down to the bottom performer. And I do that mostly because it helps me know what I need to do to work with them. If somebody's my top performer, then my objective needs to be making sure they have opportunity, they're growing, and that they are going to stay.
Yeah.
Right? You have to keep, those are your A's.
Yeah.
Your number one, your number two, those are your A players. So you've got to do everything you can to make sure they're stimulated, motivated, excited, happy. Losing them is tragic. Bottom performers, you've got to either move them up or move them out, right? They've either got to improve where they're performing or move them out either to a different seat. Sometimes they're just the right person in the wrong seat.
Yeah.
Or oftentimes the right seat's not in your business. But I've learned this many times over my career. It's a hard thing to do, but it's also kind, frankly, to the individual. If they're a low performer, nobody likes to be a low performer. And sometimes they may not realize they're in the wrong seat, but if you can see underperformance, you know it. And helping them find it, I think, is actually long-term the kindest thing you can do for them, even though it's often the hardest. So I think the way you do it is you have to be vigilant, and you can't look. I'm telling you the theory. It's hard to do. I think I persistently leave people in roles longer than I should. And the reason we do that is you look and you see the good that they do. You never have anyone who's all bad. But you realize what you've been missing out on when you replace that person with the right person, and it's a revelation. It's just a game changer. And I'm a big believer as a leader of an organization, having the right people is 90% of the work because they do the rest of it, right? Like, get the right people and then make sure that you have the right environment for them to flourish. And if you have the right environment, if you have the right people, which is much harder to do, it still falls flat if you want to be truly a high-performing organization. So I don't think there's any more important work you can do than having the best people.
Yeah, I thought I learned that over and over again. And then I just, even recently, left a guy in a company I own too long. I mean, literally cost me millions of dollars.
Well,
just one person's. And I knew better. And I was coached and advised. Move on, cut him loose. But now, I didn't have the right, I don't have anybody to replace him with. And, I don't know who to, like all kinds of stories.
all the things we tell ourselves. But listen, you telling me that gives me a little bit of hope because it's a mistake I keep making too. The thing is, I don't know that you can do it perfectly. I just think you have to really, the better you do it, the better your business is going to be. And you ignore it to your own peril. And like I said, I've repeated it many times, so shame on me for not learning the lesson. It's hard to do. It's people, their lives, they're people I care about. And having that hard conversation you put off. But inevitably, I think in the end, it's the right thing for the business, which is the true north you have to do. But it's also the right thing for the person, for them to find a better place for themselves, where they're going to be happier.
Yeah, and I think what's really trapped me is I really didn't have anybody. Like, I think it would have been easier if I had somebody that wanted to come to work and was the right fit. But if you don't have anybody, you just tend to be trapped. And of course, that's just not using HR effectively and being proactive.
Yeah, one other comment on that, Richard, I would say that this is, again, I kind of hate saying it because I feel like it's a bit of a dim view on people, but it's really hard to take someone from a C to an A.
Yeah.
B to an A, maybe. B plus to an A minus, yes, totally. But the more you're trying to stretch them from where they are to where they need to be, the less likely is they're going to make it. And I've realized in life, business, clock's ticking. I don't have time. So 99% of the time, the best thing if they're a C player is help them find a seat where they can be an A player, better fit for them, and get yourself an A player. Instead of trying to coach a C up to a B and then an A, it's an arduous, long journey that, frankly, oftentimes I find doesn't work. So really best just find the right person, make sure you got the right person in the seat, and don't try to coach them into it because it takes a long time and it's often not successful.
And the irony is that, well, to the degree you own the company or don't own the company, to the degree we execute on this, that makes us either an A player or a B player or a C player. Right?
Oh, 100, because you're only as good as your team.
Yeah.
You know, and if I see an underperforming team, I hold the leader responsible, not the underperformer on their team. You're absolutely right. Like if I want to be an A player, I have to have a team of A players.
Which means you got to be a little bit ruthless, which is not necessarily in our nature, especially if you're in the people business.
Yeah. And look, again, the only way I make my peace with it is I realize it's better for them in the long run. Because it really is. And I have story after story after story. Even in the moment, they may have hated me for doing it. But in the end, they landed in a better place and I could see them flourish. And ultimately, that's what everybody wants. So give them a chance. And unfortunately, usually somebody external to us will see it before we see it in ourselves.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about collaboration, because one of the things I've noticed about you is you're a great collaborator. Like, you pay attention to the competition, you avail yourself to people outside the company where you can like get ideas and brainstorm, and you don't operate in a silo. Can you speak to the risks and rewards of that and where you find the people to collaborate with?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think people are the greatest source of innovation, of inspiration, of opportunity. So I think connecting with people provides often unexpected benefits. And I think I always try to proactively, Keith Ferrazzi, I think is his name, wrote Never Eat Alone.
Yeah.
And kind of just suggested, if you're going to eat lunch, eat with somebody. Like, keep your network warm, stay connected to people, find out what's going on in your world. And so I just think that's incredibly valuable. Both, it's always nice to hear of people in our space, companies in our space, what they're doing. But you also find sometimes the greatest insights in unexpected places. I think you always have to filter it because you have to be the expert for your business, right? Like I expect that we know our business. And if we don't know our business, that's on us. We have to take feedback and maybe say, okay, how do I then filter that into an environment that I'm in, where it works? Sometimes it takes a little bit of massaging. But if you can understand at least the high level concept, you can then start to fit it into your culture and your business and make it work. So I just think I try to stay open to lots of different ideas. I try to look in I just think every man's my teacher in some way. So you have those conversations. What do they know that I don't? And are there things that I can apply in my life or my business that are going to make my business better or me better? And there's ample opportunity if you're willing to see it.
Yeah, they don't necessarily have to be in your business. Now, I don't work the eat alone thing much, but I like to play golf alone. But I notice whenever I don't play alone and play with somebody I've never met, like day before yesterday, I randomly ended up playing the back nine with another single on the golf course, which turned into an extraordinary experience. Mm-hmm. 12 years in the NFL and somebody that's really on a journey of personal transformation and contribution and what's next, and then spent 2 or 3 hours with his wife, who is got 4.2 million people on Instagram. out of 9 holes of golf, just the little choice of, well, maybe I'll play with him versus play alone.
Yeah.
Never play golf alone.
I likewise, I like to golf alone because you get the solitude, which is nice. But we're kind of losing the art of connection with people. And I think I blame our phones largely. It used to be if I'm standing in line at the grocery store or whatever, I'm not looking at a phone. So that means, what am I doing? Just standing there? It just makes it much more natural to instigate a conversation with someone. We become a lot more antisocial just because of that behavior. And that means I think you have to work a little bit harder to make some of those connections. But what I've learned as I've gotten older is that people are interesting. People like, it's fun to have fun with people. It's fun to joke with them. It's fun to engage them in conversation. Everyone's interesting and everyone has a story. And if you proactively solicit it, which, I'm the guy who talks to my Uber driver every time my wife thinks it's annoying, but I'm interested in their story. And I feel like life is better when you surround it with people and you're connecting with people regularly. There's a lot of research that shows that happiness is tied to human relationships. So it's worth cultivating those, if nothing else, for your own mental health and happiness. But I think it's also worth it because you learn, you expands horizons, ideas. It's just a really helpful expansion of perspective.
Yeah, I've noticed that in you. And I think that's just maybe an unsung hero trait, but in your presence, I notice you tend to ask questions, and a lot of people don't. So whether it's the Uber driver or somebody you're collaborating with or somebody on your team, you're curious, and I think that's just a stunningly powerful leadership trait.
Well, thank you, Richard. That's kind. In How to Win Friends and Influence People, he says that people's favorite topic is themselves. Everybody's always happy to talk about themselves. And I am genuinely interested. I guess that's the thing is I want to know more about people. I want to understand them. I want to understand how they think. And I do it because I like it. I don't do it. I don't know. It's.
Yeah. Not a strategy. Yeah. It's just identity. It's who you are.
Yeah.
So speaking of who you are, I find your preparation for running a billion-dollar global company to be a fascinating journey. I'm curious how much of it was intentional, how much of it prepared you for this role in business, because you have lived and worked all over the world for a long time. And, I meet a lot of people that I'm not sure they have the ability to just go move to Korea and live and work in Korea or New Zealand or Australia or Japan and you did that for many, many years. So tell us about that. How did you end up doing that? Why did you do it? What did you learn from it? I don't know if you were thinking about preparing to run a huge company, but how did it prepare you?
Yeah. Well, I don't know that I necessarily had. I would have loved to have thought that I could have a role like I'm in now. At the same time, as a college graduate, it seemed very lofty, right? Just starting my career. I just wanted to get a job, let alone run a company. So I found that my goals were, over time, they kind of build onto each other. But I have some really good advice that I received from a mentor early on in my career. Is he said, too often people think of their career as linear, where you basically you have one point you're going to. And for some, let's say you want to be a doctor, specifically the kind of type of doctor, what medicine you want to practice. Some people, it can be very linear. You just go through steps. But for most of us, we kind of have this desultory journey where what you do is you take a role, grow into it, see what you like about it and what you don't like about it, and then kind of go to the next thing. And it may not be direct. It might be just kind of adjacent or somewhat just directional, let's say. And I feel like that's kind of what I've done. I started out, first of all, wanting to have international adventure and experience. And I wanted to learn another language. I had an experience early on where I had an opportunity to learn Korean on a service mission. That helped a lot. So opened up a door to go back to Korea to practice my language. And I think the world is so big and interesting. I wanted to be in it. I wanted to experience it. I grew up in a small town in Utah. So experiencing more of the world was really stimulating for me. And that was my first goal. I just wanted to work in international business, and I found a path there. Then once I had that, then I wanted to be a general manager of a business, which meant I could run a business unit in an international market. Then I was finally able to do that. And then I thought, I'd like to be a regional leader of these general managers. So I'm managing a region of the world. And then I had a chance to do that. And then I had a chance to move into a head of sales or revenue creation role, which was kind of the next graduated step there. And when I got to that point, then I started thinking, hey, I'd really love to run a company someday. But it kind of grew with my career, that aspiration, that idea, in part because I think for me at the time, just wanting to be a general manager of a company in a foreign country was something that I really wanted to do. Once I achieved that, then I had a chance to go, this is great. I learned a lot. Now what? And it gave me a chance to then elevate my sights again. Some may do it differently. For me, that's just how it worked. Maybe some are more visionary and have a bigger idea of that. And I would have loved to have said that this is something that I would do in my career. But I also feel like I've been lucky. There's been some things that have like breaks that have gone my way. And I've had opportunities that I didn't know I would have, but in the end did. And I feel really grateful for it. But really just focusing on the next goal ahead, I guess, has been what's worked for me.
And so if you were advising a young person, how important would you say a second language is, being not only fluent in the language, but the culture?
I think it's really valuable for my development. Just you learn things. It's a window into the culture when you learn Korean, let's say. And Korea is it's a fascinating place. It's very different from the United States. You also realize people are people. There's way more common threads than there are differences, but the way Koreans think about some things is fascinating. There's a lot of good research that shows that the way Koreans, Chinese, the Asian, like North Asia, especially the way they do numbers is more effective than the way we do it in the United States. They count differently. In Korea, they count by tens, hundreds, thousands differently than we do. And so anyway, they're better at math as a result. So just understanding how people think is really valuable, and the language is a window into that you just don't get any other way. So I think for personal development, it's worth it. Career-wise, it definitely opened doors for me. I didn't do it with the expectation of that, although it did in the end. And I think it depends on what you want to ultimately do, whether or not a language is how important it is. Nevertheless, I think for personal development, it's one of the more intellectually challenging things that I've done. And it's also something that I think it helped me kind of develop and round out as an individual more than most other things I've done.
Beautiful. So staying on the theme of young people, if you could off the top of your head, and I don't ever prep my guests with questions, so this is just off the top of your head because I don't prep me either. If you were given somebody like, maybe 3 non-negotiable, most important things, maybe you would do it over differently, maybe you did it, and now you're clear that was really, really valuable. I find young people, like in their 20s, they don't have a lot of clarity. They don't have a lot of strategy. They don't have a lot of confidence. They don't have any vision. And they don't have a lot of resources. I mean, they're out there, of course, but they don't have a connection, it seems, to the resources. What would you say to new people, young people in their 20s? They want to go build a life, build a career, build a reputation, build a network. What are 2 or 3 things that you would call essential?
Yeah, good question. I'm just going to say 3, and they might be terrible, but I'd say number 1, bloom where you're planted. So your first job is never going to be your best job. Richard, I know your story about being in a chicken slaughterhouse. It's like, that wasn't your dream job, but it was essential in your journey. So bloom where you're planted. Learn every job, every opportunity has a lesson in it, even if it's the worst job. And to be honest, some of the jobs I hated the most were the ones that I had early in my career, and I learned a lot from it, both what I wanted to do and not wanted to do. It helped to direct me. So just bloom where you're planted. Whatever it is, learn what you can out of it. It's never your final place, but it's a stepping stone on your journey. I started with our company in our warehouse. I had no idea that would mean anything to me in the future. And in the end, it's meant a great deal.
Huge.
So
Yeah.
just bloom where you're planted. It doesn't matter if you're working for $10 an hour in a warehouse. You never know when that's going to benefit you down the road and how. So that's number one. Number two, I'd say proactively solicit and find mentors to help you on your journey. I wish I would have done more of that early on in my career. What I realize now is that I want to pay it forward. And Richard, the time and you're generous with your time and what you share with me as a mentor. And you do that just because you care, just because you're passing on knowledge that you have. And people are willing to do that. So as a young person, ask that of people you admire. Find people who are on a path that you want to emulate and create a personal relationship with them, and they will enjoy it too. I want to pass knowledge on. I want to help young people. So that's number two, is find mentors and proactively engage with mentors. And then I think the third thing I would say is it's amazing how much in life is just showing up. You never know when things are going to break your way or against you. You know, you get the good and the bad bounces in life. That's just inevitable. But if you show up every day, opportunity finds you. Like I said, if you're blooming where you're planted, you've got a mentor that's kind of helping you on your journey, and then just show up. Sometimes it's hard to show up, you know?
What do you mean by showing up? That's kind of a cliche. I know you know what it means. I'm not sure the audience always knows what it means.
Look, I think it's just put yourself out there every day. Like, show up with intention in your life. During the pandemic, when I worked from home, I got up, I showered, I went to work every day because I wanted it to be, I didn't want to just roll out of bed and roll over to my computer screen and act like I didn't care. Like, I was putting my best self forward. And that's what I mean by showing up, is put your best self forward. Some people, they just expect life to happen for them, and it doesn't. You gotta go out there and have an adventure and let life happen, the good and the bad. But when you put yourself out there, it's amazing how opportunity finds you, your path becomes illuminated. None of us begin our career, our lives knowing where it's going. That's part of the magic of life. It's also part of the challenge. So lean into that and realize, instead of being afraid of it, that I'm going to embrace it and ride that wild, roller coaster that's going to come along the way. But as long as you're showing up well, meaning intentionally showing up, I always say, put your best foot forward. Bring your best self to work. I say to our team, I want to bring my best self for whatever that takes. So to me, that's what showing up means, is be there and be in a place where opportunity can find you. It's not going to find you in your house. It's not going to find you when you're scrolling social media. It's going to find you when you're out, when you're connecting, when you're kind of embracing the messiness of life.
That's a beautiful cap on this, Ben. You are one of my favorite business leaders, and I'm constantly in awe of how you carry the responsibility and the opportunity and the risk and all of it. And so thank you for sharing with my audience. This goes wide and far. Somebody's life is going to change from hearing your story.
Well, thank you, Richard. I think you've had a big impact on my life, and I try to show up in ways that I've seen you show up. And also, I feel like every conversation that we have expands my thinking, my horizon, and the way that you challenge and the way you push and the way you kind of, I love the kind of relationship that we have. And I think if I think are essential in life, the kind of people you can just be straight with, right? Like, you don't have to gild any lilies for me. You can tell me straight, I can tell you straight back. And because of the level of trust that we have, it's incredibly liberating, to just say, this is what I think, Richard. I'm not going to varnish it for you.
Right. We're just playing full out.
Yeah. And those kinds of relationships are invaluable. You don't have to censor yourself. You can just kind of say things straight. And when you have that kind of relationship, it's amazing the kinds of conversations and the things you're able to learn.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. And thank all of you for tapping in, share it far and wide, and change somebody's life. Until next time, Richard Bliss Brooke, signing off.